Hey there, Patrick Peace here. Finally finished the Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. At the beginning of chapter 13, he said, oh, stop reading here and go get the extended phenotype, my next book, which is really his pride and joy, he calls it, basically, right? And so, of course, I didn't listen to him. I went ahead and finished chapter 13 anyway, and I'm glad I did, because it summarizes his views. I'll explain to you what the extended phenotype is just quickly, so that you can know where he's going with his reasoning. He started with the selfish gene as his theory for where life came from, and then because it didn't explain everything, it didn't seem to be a workable argument or a workable theory, he introduced a new theory called the extended phenotype. Now, he says that a phenotype is what you would see your genes able to produce. So, for example, if you got green eyes, the phenotype is from your genes is the visible effect, let's say. So, the phenotype of your genes would produce curly hair or straight hair. The phenotype of your genes would produce green eyes or blue eyes, etc. So he says that's what a phenotype is. And then he says an extended phenotype is something that the genes are able to manipulate outside of the body. So not just within the body, like hair color and eyes, but an extended phenotype is something that genes are able to affect outside the body. For example, a bird's nest or a beaver dam. So if a beaver is able to create a dam, it's because the genes are having an extended effect outside of the body. That's his theory. Now, the reason I'm glad I read chapter 13, because at the end of the chapter, he summarizes his theory or his argument. He says that before there was genes or before there was DNA, you had these original replicators that came from the primordial soup. I call it primordial, he calls it primeval, whatever. From the primordial soup, I call it. And he says the replicators came into existence by chance. This is on page 264, right? He says on page 258, it must have started as rudimentary cooperation. Then again, he says it must have. He just said, well, it just must have. It must have started as rudimentary cooperation. And in other words, you had all these molecules. We're talking on the molecular level here. He's saying back billions of years ago, when everything just started from a primordial soup, there was no life, and you just had these little molecules, and they just must have started as rudimentary cooperation. They just must have started cooperating with themselves, right? And the replicate, it says. That's his explanation. His explanation is really no explanation, right? He says, perhaps arose. In the very next sentence, he says, perhaps they arose. Or must have. Perhaps. That's his foundation. That's his reasoning. Must have. Just must have happened by chance. Replicators come into existence by chance, and he says, by the random jostling of smaller particles. So in other words, he's saying that in his summary, chapter 13, he says you had this primordial soup, and then it got jostled around. And as it got jostled around, some of the particles just must have started cooperating and then started replicating, just on their own, just randomly. Now here's the problem with that. If that's how it started billions of years ago, why isn't there still random particles jostling around and coming together? Imagine. He says, oh, he's got an answer for that. Because now they're all bundled together. Because all these things that happened way back in the past, now they were all bundled together, and that's why you don't have that happening anymore, because they're all already within organisms. All these replicators have already developed into organisms, so they're not, it's not happening anymore. This happened way back in the past. That's his argument. And again, that's what the foundation of the selfish gene is based on. Random chance, right? Existence, that's it. It just must have started by rudimentary cooperation, he calls it. So then, for him to explain how beavers build dams and how birds build nests, he says these must be an adaptation through Darwinian evolution. In other words, there must have been a bunch of birds that started trying to build nests, but they only could make a couple of sticks, and so they didn't have as many offspring as the ones that built a little bit better, a few sticks, and then a little bit better, and a little bit better, and now you've got a nest. Or there must have been eons of beavers that were trying to build dams, but they couldn't build them properly, so they'd just build like something that looked weird. And then slowly over time, you get the idea, right? You get the idea for what he's trying to explain. Now, the problem with that theory is that throughout this book, he considers it's a very anti-human book. It's against the... See, there's a reason, I believe, why Christ said that you are of more value than many sparrows. Remember, he said that a bird doesn't fall to the ground without God's knowledge? And he says you're of more value. We are of more value because we have the ability to communicate not only to one another, but to God. And in fact, when we're communicating with one another, we're communicating with these tiny individual points of spirit, which contain a tiny little part of God, the little bit of the Spirit of God, some less than others, you know. And you got Charles Manson, and you got weirdos, and you got some people that maybe have more, you know. There's characters in the Bible that say, give me a double measure of your Spirit, Lord. Remember Elijah and Elisha and all that story, right? He wanted more of God's Spirit. And this is why also that Christ said, if you want something, ask for more of God's Spirit. He said that's the solution, because they said, well, you know, how do we get what we want? How can we get what we're enough to eat and enough to clothe and all these physical things that we need? He said, how much more would God give the Holy Spirit to them that ask? Because having God's Spirit is what allows us to have results in our lives. That allows us to go out and get a job. It allows us to get along with other people. By having God's Spirit and more of it, this enables us to communicate with other people and get along with other people and pray to God. And you get the idea, right? So that's a universal concept, I believe. Whatever the religion, whatever it is, we're in the human race, we're in the human family. We all need to cooperate somehow through theism, some form of theism doctrine. So the doctrine that first of all, why would I ever want to read the extended phenotype? If this is based on random chance and the shaking of some original molecules from the primordial soup, why would I want to read a theory that builds on that? And I'm sure in the extended phenotype, I can almost imagine what it would say. Well, now if you, as I said in chapter 3 of the selfish gene, and as I said in chapter 7 of the self, he constantly goes back and refers to his own material, constantly. And he constantly goes back and refers to other academics like himself. So I would love to see an academic examine this book and see how weak it is, but I'm sure history will take care of that on its own. I'm not worried about that because, you know, I'm not in the hallowed halls of academia, but somebody will eventually come along and figure out that this is based on a sand foundation, a very, very no foundation, really. It's just based on assumption, right? Based on his own idea that he came up with out of his head. But the danger of it is that it's anti-human. It says that humans are no different than viruses, that humans are just carriers. They're machines that are meant to carry, like robots that are meant to carry the DNA within us, and that's our only purpose, is to carry on those genomes and to pass them on to the next generation, and that's it. And so it treats humans no different than a virus, just created out of random soup and no purpose other than to propagate genes. So somebody reading this would say, well, then the less humans the better, because humans are just replicating like a virus, and if they're going to take over the whole planet, they're going to damage the planet. It's not hard to see where people get ideas that are anti-human when they're reading stuff like this. So if the people in power are reading this type of material and thinking that this is truth, how is that going to affect their outlook on humanity? If they're in charge of, maybe their companies hire hundreds of thousands of people, how are they going to feel about their employees? Or they're a king of a country that's has millions of people, or they're the supreme leader of a country that has millions of people. How do you think they're going to treat their people after reading stuff like this? Not too well, especially if they believe it, or if they absorb it and say, oh yeah, that must be the truth. We're just virus carriers, that's all we are. That's not all we are. And thank God we had somebody come and explain to us how important we are. Explain to us that we have the capacity for love and peace and empathy and self-control and helping each other and cooperation. This cooperation, and in fact the beaver makes a dam from the intelligence that's built into it. It's not from some random thing. The ability that we have to love one another is not from some random soup that happened 1 billion years ago. That's just an idea that somebody made up. That's all it is. So I wish I could say more, and I wish I could be more eloquent in dismantling all the philosophical fallacies that are contained within this book, the circular arguments or the assumptive arguments or what have you. But I'm not that skilled. I'm not a scholar. I'm not a doctorate. But I can read an understanding. I have a little bit of knowledge, and so I can say, hey, wait a minute. If I can figure out that this doesn't make sense, surely there's many other people that can. And throughout history, surely it'll be proven that it doesn't make sense. Now, look what I got. Da-da-da. I don't know why it comes out backwards in the video. If somebody can tell me how to flip a video, then I'm probably doing something simple wrong. Please let me know. But this is what I'm working on. I just got back from the library because I refused to purchase. I purchased the Selfish Gene, but I won't purchase any other of his books because why would I want to support that type of anti-human doctrine? I wouldn't want to support that, not at all. Absolutely not. But now this is the one that a lot of people have said, oh, this made me not believe in God anymore, or turned me into an atheist or whatever. At least I've heard some anecdotal stories to that effect, right? And at least that's what it obviously wants to promote because of the title, The God Delusion, right? He's saying that God is a delusion. So I'm going to go through it, and I'm going to start reading it, and maybe I'll be able to do a video on the whole thing. Maybe I'll do video chapter by chapter, but I'll see where it takes me. I'm looking forward to digging into it, and I hope that I can make some videos on it that would be helpful to somebody out there, especially younger people that are just starting their education, maybe from the ages of teens to maybe late teens to the early 20s, the people that's in the college and just starting college or just starting university studies or something like that, because I don't think usually this is probably not covered in high school. I'm guessing that this would be being covered in the college level courses and things like that. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to digging into that because I want to be able to have a counter argument. I don't know how long I'm going to be here, but if I can do something productive with my life and show somebody, hey, tell them, hey, it's not a God delusion, man. God is real. God is real. Ask the people that have been healed. Ask the people that have experienced miracles. Ask them to tell you their miracle in private. See, everybody has a miracle, but they're kind of kept private. And in fact, that's the instruction. The instruction is say, hey, don't tell anyone your miracle, because it kind of detracts from the miracle. Because a miracle in itself is so personal that when they tell it to somebody else, it kind of like, yeah, you kind of go, okay, well, sure you got healed, but yeah, certain number of people get healed every day, and I guess statistically you're going to have some people that just get healed automatically, spontaneously, with no reason. And so it kind of falls to the ground. But when the person experiences it themselves, that is part of the miracle, is that the person knows, yes, God heard my prayer. He rescued me from alcoholism, or he rescued me from drug addiction. I couldn't have done this by myself. They have no other explanation for it. And that's from Scripture too, I was in a miry clay and God lifted me up out of the pit. God lifted me up out of the pit. Otherwise I'd be I'd be long gone. So now I'm here. I'm on Earth. I'm still kicking. And so while I'm still kicking, this is my next target. I'm looking forward to digging into it. And if I can use it as a springboard to encourage somebody that might have been affected negatively by it, then I will feel like I'm following my purpose. I say, hey, I can help somebody out there. Help somebody to have more faith so that they can drift more towards love and compassion and empathy and all those good things I mentioned, and drift further away from heartlessness, callousness, unfeeling, hatred for humanity. That's what this promotes, really. It promotes absolute total disregard for the beauty of humanity, of the created being, and even of the beauty of created nature. How can you appreciate it when you just think, oh, well, it's all just random and it doesn't mean anything because it's just, these viruses replicating themselves or what have you. It's a very dark view of humanity. And for some people, well, they can separate that and say, oh, no, this is just an academic view, and I have all these good qualities outside of that. Well, it's not that easy to separate the two when you see what's happening in the world today, and you say, why can people be so callous? Why can people be so hard-hearted towards huge numbers of people that we've seen in history, in the recent history especially, with the wars and things and oppression and all those kind of things? This certainly doesn't help. And don't forget, this is 30 years old. So we're going back to what year was it first published? 30 years, 2020, 1990. Wow, I got good math, don't I? Eh? How long did that take me to figure out? It's going back there, is what I'm saying. So it's been around a long time, and it's probably influenced a lot of people because it's a well-known name, right? It's a well-known name, and I think this book is even probably more well-known than that one. So I've done my groundwork. Now I'm ready to examine what he has to say about this, and if he starts referring back to that book, I'll know whether he's bullshitting me or not, right? I'll know, because that's what that book is. It's bullshit. It's based on nothing. It's based on his own assumptions that he pulled out of thin air, or he got the idea from somebody else and adjusted it and fancied it up with all kinds of wordplay and all kinds of descriptive examination of nature and what have you, and threw it all together in a big soup, and he's come out with his book. So now I'm gonna, beautiful bird in the tree, I'm gonna read this. Oh, this beautiful creature. I'm gonna read this, and then I'll try and go from there and make some videos for you. I really appreciate you watching. God bless you. Maybe you see this down the road in the future, and I'm gonna leave it up public, and yeah, I hope it helps. God bless you. Take care. Good luck. And for Richard Dawkins, should he ever see this video, God bless you. I pray that your eyes would be open to the truth. I pray that your eyes would be open to the weakness of your views, which you basically confess to as well. I'll give you credit. You don't say that this is the be-all and the end-all. You're kind of like, you admit to a lot of what you've done already. So that being the case, I would simply say that I pray the best for you, Richard Dawkins. I don't hate you. I don't have hard feelings about you. But don't forget, you offered this to the market and I bought it. So I'm obligated to give an honest reaction to it. Am I not? Right? I mean, if you're sending this out to the world, you're sending this out to the world, and you're saying this is my opinion. I'm going to send out this video to the world and say this is my opinion as well. So we'll see where it leads, right? So far, you've obviously, if you've seen my previous videos on chapters 1 to 12 and 13, 1 to 13, and this is the final video I'm doing on this one, you know exactly my opinion on this particular book, and we'll move on from there. So it's an exchange of ideas, and I'll leave it for the audience to make their own conclusions. No atheists in foxholes, my friend. If you're in trouble, call out to God, and He'll hear you. If you seek Him with all your heart, that's the key, right? If you seek Him with all your heart, you'll find Him. God bless you. Thank you for watching. Take care now. Bye-bye.